Hello, welcome to This Is. We have finally seen the PlayStation 5 in the flesh, and everyone hates it. Except me. I think it's great.
That might be a little over-exaggerated.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. There is some pain points here, and this all stems from some footage that we've seen over the weekend, wherein a bunch of Japanese YouTubers got a chance to see the PS5 up close.
And they got to see it in its glorious, giant form, importantly, with a little sprinkling of freedom added.
That's the word for it? Freedom?
Yeah. You gotta sprinkle the freedom.
All right. We'll go with that one. So there was this Japanese YouTube event for Gaming Week where a bunch of YouTubers got a chance to see the PS5 up
Including
close.
some of your VTubers.
Yes, including some Niji-sanji VTubers and one of the voice actors that I follow, Natsuki Hanae.
I gotta say, someone did, I forget who it was, but someone had the best thumbnail. It was literally the PlayStation and like their hand, like the most perfect thumbnail for a hands-on video.
Look, so it's really cool though, because for the first time we actually have some size perspective for the console.
It's really big.
Yeah, so in this press briefing room, we have a TV. We don't know what the size of it is, of course, but with the PS5 right in front of it on a table, that console is massive. I mean, not that we didn't know that already, but this really puts it into perspective. It is going to be a monster in your living room.
Well, it's fine. Size is clearly not as important as Matt's squeaky chair behind me, which is really irritating me. Matt, can you please stop squeaking? I'm trying to give a thoughtful and comprehensive defense of the PlayStation 5 that everyone has decided to hate, and you're over here squeaking your chair.
Yeah, that's not me.
That's the ceiling, probably.
Yeah,
That's the mouse that we might have upstairs.
Matt, can I formally apologize for slandering you? Okay. So Ken, can you please explain to me and the wonderful audience why everyone in Japan hates the PlayStation? That doesn't make sense to me. I think everyone should love it. It seems like the correct way of doing the buttons. I don't think there's any problem here, but I mean, I guess if you want to try to describe some imaginary problem that everyone is making up.
Well, hate might be a little bit of a strong word, but there is a little bit of work that Japanese consumers will have to do to rework their muscle memory in order to use the PS5 controller. And that is because the circle and X buttons, which we here in the West use as confirm on the X and deny on circle, they actually have it flipped in Japan. It kind of makes sense though. X means no, circle means yes.
Okay, here. This is Austin's rule of controllers. If you have your face buttons, so the buttons on the right side of your controller, the X, Y, A, B, the circle, square, etc., whatever you want to call them. The bottom one is yes, the right one is no. The end. Thank you very much for watching my TED Talk. Feel free to subscribe to This Is for lots of nuggets of wisdom like this. But for some reason in Japan, and I don't know about this X and O, like as if that means something or not. That means that you cannot actually press the button you want. Like if you're used to it on the PS3 or the PS4, you now have to flip your muscle memory.
I think it's more of an intuitive language. X means no, circle means yes.
But the thing is,
I understand where I understand where you're coming from though. I mean, it's just what we're used to be fair. Because those buttons were embedded in the PlayStation since the very beginning, the Japanese, you know, who have made this console for us, had the buttons flipped.
That makes sense now.
Had the buttons flipped because that was the original purpose.
Yeah.
But there's millions of players, obviously in Japan, that are used to this with muscle memory, and they're completely turning it around for, I mean, arguably is a majority of the world, but it's still the home of the PlayStation, which is obviously, you know,
think you're trying to say that we exported some freedom into their button combinations.
Sony of America might have had a little too much influence of the PS5, but
you mean
also,
the right amount of influence.
I'm sorry, the rest of the world, but Austin Evans is a very selfish human being. But I kind of see it from both sides. I'm in the market where this thing makes sense, right?
Yes.
And is it really a big deal for them to just keep it the way it was?
Anyone who's saying cancel the PS5 is dumb and should stop. But there are a lot more things that we did learn from this very limited hands-on, to be fair.
Yes.
So we got some gameplay. So we finally see, and obviously we'd seen a little bit of gameplay from some of their events, but we actually had like real people playing, streaming the games.
Absolutely.
So that was cool. But on top of that, we also get a little bit of information on how the controller and specifically how the console actually performs.
Right.
Because according to everyone, and it really shouldn't be a huge surprise considering it is just so massive, the PlayStation 5 is, wait for it, quiet. So this was a major problem for the PlayStation 4 right? The first PS4 Pro,
The
first
PS3. I have a launch
PS3.
PS3, and that thing was practically a refrigerator or heater.
I was gonna say a tornado, but yeah, that
Tornado,
works too.
yeah.
So it makes sense, right? Because the PlayStation 5 has a very large surface area. I love to see what's inside. I'm straight up, as soon as I get a PS5, I'm tearing it apart. I just want to see what's inside.
Thank God we have 3 of them.
Well, don't count your eggs before they're chickens. So at this point, there's still a fair few things that we have not seen in the PS5.
So SSD, UI, SSD speed specifically, that's the one thing they didn't show.
There was one thing though, there's a mystery little like screw or a nut on the side of the console, which very much does seem like that's going to be the access door where you can add that M2 SSD, because they've already gone on record saying that you can upgrade this by adding an additional SSD if you'd like. I assume that's what that's for.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we have more information on the LEDs inside of the PS5 controller. Obviously, much like the PS4 controller with the little light bar on top, this one changes colors based on what's happening in the game, which should be a nice addition. Obviously not something big that anyone wants to hear as far as features said, but it is still information nevertheless.
And it does light up based on what controller you are. So if you're a controller number 2, number 3, or whatever, you'll see that on the controller. Very nice. It does seem like people are pretty amped about how the controller feels.
Absolutely, and like just looking at it in Natsuki Hanae's hand, because he had like a little box in his on his video that at least showed off in perspective like how it looks like.
Yeah.
And I mean, it looks like a pretty beefy controller, but still pretty comfortable.
USB-C?
USB-C.
It's got a microphone built in?
Yep. But all of this to say though, Sony isn't giving us anything.
And of course, right before we post this video, Sony drops a brand new teardown of the PS5. So there's a lot to unpack here. I'll probably talk a little bit more about it later, but some of my big sort of takeaways here definitely have to do with the fact that they are using liquid metal to cool the SoC. Now, this is something that we've seen in high-end GPUs, and people like Linus use it all the time to get better performance. But the downside is it makes it very, very fragile. So they have actually built a little bit of a foam barrier around it to keep that liquid metal in place, which is important because if it goes everywhere, it can cause serious problems. On top of that, the heatsink for the PS5 is quite large. You can see where you'll be able to install the M2 drive. And generally speaking, I'm actually kind of impressed with just how much you should be able to upgrade the PS5. They made a big deal about how they've really done a lot to optimize the console to be easily upgradable. Things like the GPU, the CPU, all of that is actually not too incredibly deep into the console. You also have things like the power supply. There's a lot that is, I don't want to say user upgradable because really you're probably never going to be able to buy like, spare parts for your PS5 and easily swap it out. But at the very least, if you ever do want to get into the console, it looks fairly straightforward. But definitely be sure to subscribe not only here, but also on the main channel because I will absolutely be tearing the PS5 down as soon as I get my grubby little hands on one. Anyway, back to the original video that we shot yesterday. This console will be on sale in about, what, a month from now?
Yeah, like 6 weeks?
10,000 people are gonna get one.
It's not gonna be 10,000, dude.
Look, I can believe this stock is going to be hard to find when you first get your hands on the PlayStation 5.
It is crazy though. I mean, it's crazy here in the US, right? We've obviously seen the stock problems, right? In Japan, they're doing like they do with a lot of things, a lot of store lotteries. I do agree with Matt to an extent. There is a little bit of hesitation here. Like, where is the information and how much much is there right now to this thing?
Some things we've still not seen about the PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
The UI, basically at all. I believe there's like a 2-second little teaser at one of the like little videos that they had shown before.
Oh, in the press briefing, which was
Very
just
short.
a startup screen of the PS5.
Yep. Apparently, no pixel has been left untouched, which is nice, especially when you look at what the Xbox interface looks like, at the moment, at least.
Yeah.
But I think that there's still a lot of questions about a console which is shipping in a matter of days to at least some people, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious. I don't think the controller thing matters at all as far as the mix of the
I
Zero and the X.
don't think it really matters. It sucks, but it's going to be something that people's going to get used to.
It makes sense because now, no matter where you are in the world, every PlayStation controller functions the same, as opposed to before where you would have different buttons do different things based on if you were outside or inside of Japan. That's totally fine. The fact that this console is quiet means that it also needs to keep up a very high level of performance. Because let's not forget, the PlayStation 5 does take advantage of boost clocks, which to get all the nerd talk out of the way, means that if it's not running cool, you will lose performance. So the fact that if they properly cooled it, it's staying at a high level of performance and it's quiet is obviously the best case scenario. And if the way they did that was to make the PlayStation 17 feet long, then I guess that's just what we have to deal
I
with.
feel like we're gonna open this thing up and it's just gonna be heat
It's a
pipes and
surfboard.
heat pipes and
It's a surfboard. What is your biggest fear about the PS5 right now? Given what we know and what we don't know, what is your biggest fear?
that there aren't gonna be as many of them out there, and as a result, timelines for everything are gonna shift.
Are you talking about you think that pre-orders are going to be canceled?
Like, what is the incentive for developers to release this at a point where people won't even have the console in their hands
Sure.
to begin with?
Totally.
They might as well just make the game better. Not to say that this is actually gonna happen, and I could be completely off base with this, but
No, there've been a lot of stories about people who have had pre-orders and all of a sudden it's like, oh, you're actually gonna get it in December or something. Like,
yeah, when are people gonna get their
Yeah.
consoles is the big question. Because obviously holiday season's coming up, there's high demand for it, but we actually have no numbers for this thing.
well, and it makes sense, right? I mean, this is a very common thing. Every time a console generation comes around, usually it's in this sort of October, November timeframe. Almost universally, it sells out. You know, the manufacturers, they'll make as many consoles as they can. That first run will really run out. And then the real test will be next year once console supplies get a little bit better. What's the sell-through, right? Because, I mean, if you look at like even the original Xbox One, that was a console which history has not looked kindly upon. That totally sold out, right? It was months later before it became to start, you know, just a little bit became clear that the Xbox was a real sales failure. Obviously, you could use your big monkey brain and figure that out because it was $500 and had Kinect and had no games and was also less powerful. But if you put that aside, always like the first part of the launch is always a mess. So I'm not super worried about that. I am curious about what the games look like for the PlayStation 5 and for the Xbox, right?
Right.
But my bigger question is, how many games are going to be coming out, not necessarily just this year, but even like late next year, right? Like, are you gonna buy a PlayStation 5 in November and sit on it for 6 months before any cool first-party games come out?
I mean, that's not gonna stop early adopters. There's a lot of hype around these things. There's a lot of hype even around the graphics cards for these games that don't even need it.
You think about people,
well, they do.
You think about people who are standing in line for an RTX 3080. Oh boy, wait for that PlayStation 5 line.
Oh man.
Thank you very much for watching this episode of This Is. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and make sure to follow us over on the Twittergram, the Faceballs.
No. What? Just go to youtube.com/AustinEvans.
You can do that too.
That's
but
that's good enough.
Faceballs are much better.